Welcome back to another podcast episode where we help aspiring developers get jobs and junior developers grow. With me today, I invited 3 graduates, and we are going to be doing a review on Lambda. It's a coding bootcamp. It's gotten quite the hype in many different ways. And so I actually had a lot of people request this review, both good and bad things that people have kind of mentioned. So the whole point of this episode is to give you an honest and transparent view into what their experiences have been like. But like usual, we'll go ahead and get started with our intros. Josh, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. As you've been told, my name is Josh. I was a cook for 12 years before I just started to learn to code. It's like the millionth time I got burned in the face. I was like, maybe I can do better than this. And so I started on my own and then needed a little bit more structure. And then I found Lambda, and I don't feel like it was sold to me. It kind of sold itself. I felt like it was what I needed to fill the gaps in my knowledge to progress to the next stage.
Okay, cool. So where are you at now since you've graduated?
I'm doing some freelance work right now. I stopped kind of looking for a full-time job until things are a little less crazy. It's holding me over, so that's good. I'm helping a friend launch his business, and that's great. It's nice to be able to help somebody out with something that I've learned.
I agree. That's awesome. All right, cool. How about you, Patrick?
Hello, my name is Patrick. I was part of Web Part-Time 7 program. I'm in Southern California, and I was previously in the legal industry, having worked both for the court system and then also in the private sector as a paralegal at an immigration law firm. I had dabbled in coding off and on for years and years and years. I had gone to college for political science thinking I would go to law school. But then when you decide you don't want to go to law school, you don't have that many options. So I started looking for ways to get back into coding. I had actually taken a boot camp previously before finding Lambda School. And this was when all of the boot camps had just started up and were just becoming a thing. And it wasn't enough for me to be successful. And then when I started looking again, I came across Lambda School. And similar to what Josh said, it sort of sold itself. I mean, it really was, oh, you're going to teach me live and I can ask questions in real time and get feedback. And it was everything that I thought that I needed at the time.
Cool. Thanks. How about you, Angel?
Before Lambda School, I tried going to college, university, and then that didn't work out so well for me. So I ended up working at a few different jobs, like at a warehouse. I was working at a bank at some point, and the last job I had before Lambda School was at a donut shop. And so I was trying to go back to school, but it wasn't really what I thought it was going to be like, and I wanted something more hands-on. And so I ended up finding about Lambda School through a friend who recommended it. This was in late 2018. So Lambda had only been around for maybe 2 years or less. And so I really thought it was like a scam or something like that, especially with the ISA. You don't pay right away. You get to pay after you graduate unless you get a job, type of thing. So I ended up applying and I got accepted. I started in around November of 2018. And after that, I worked as a student, and then I worked for Lambda as a TL for some time as well. And I was there about a year, a little over a year. And then about 6 months after I graduated, actually about 5 months after I graduated, I was able to land a full-time position. I started off as an intern and then recently got promoted to a full-time role. So that's where I'm at today.
Okay, awesome. Patrick, did you mention you were working as a software engineer right now, or are you still looking?
I'm still currently looking. I'm actively applying and interviewing for positions.
Okay, cool. And Angel, you are actively a software engineer now.
Yes, I'm a front-end engineer.
Okay. All right, cool. Real quick, when did everyone graduate?
I graduated November 2020.
Okay.
I graduated August 2020.
Okay.
And then I graduated, I would say January, mid-January of 2020.
Okay. All right, perfect. Okay, so yeah, let's dive in. What do you think of the application process?
For me, it was, I don't want to say disjointed. The application part was easy. So filling it out, saying, what do you want to do? Why do you want to be here? That kind of thing. The software test got me a little bit. And so when I remember getting an email from Lambda and saying, okay, well, thank you for applying. If you don't hear back from us within a week, then we're not moving forward with you, or however it was worded. And so I waited it out, and I wasn't really clear that there was going to be whether I should be taking the test or not, or studying. I actually wasn't even aware that there was a pre-course curriculum until after I had already been admitted. But that is a thing, come to find out. But I hadn't been studying or doing anything. The week passed and I never heard back from them. So I actually started looking to alternatives. So I was looking for like Team Treehouse and some other stuff. And I had spent the whole weekend going in a completely different direction. I started learning Python just to try to do something. And then a couple of days had passed. I hear back from Lambda and I said, oh, wait, I got to study JavaScript now to take this test. And I had to completely turn on a dime and then get the test. And the test was okay. It was what you could expect of a reasonable person spent a little bit of time coding. It wasn't overly difficult as long as you were prepared.
Okay. Okay, so you felt like they were a little bit disorganized with just notifying you that you even got accepted. So you felt a little underprepared or rushed to study for that test, right?
A little, yeah. I mean, like I said, maybe this is on me. I don't know. I don't remember being notified that there was a pre-course or anything that would help me get to the test or pass the test. I remember jumping on Free Code Camp and stuff like that, trying to figure out what I need to know bare bones just to get through the test. And then I actually liked the phone call. I think that they did to tell you about the program, ask why you wanted to be involved and things like that. That was kind of a nice touch. It felt personal. And then when they tell you, you get the email that says Lambda's going to invest in you, and that feels good. Like someone's going to take a chance on me. So I did like that part of it.
Okay, cool. Did anyone have a different experience?
I did. I felt like maybe by the time I got to them, they were more organized because they were like, hey, there's going to be some pre-course curriculum and here's what it's going to be consistent of. And by the way, there's going to be some pre-course curriculum and make sure you do the pre-course curriculum. So I was like pretty clear that needed to be done. So it seemed like they were a lot more organized when they got to me because I didn't have that experience. The test was, stumped me a little bit, but I did okay with what I'd been studying. So I think maybe they had improved since Patrick had applied, but it was fine for me.
Okay.
Yeah, for me it was very similar. They had a pre-course work. I didn't get to do the live one. I think at the point of time that I applied, they only had recordings. So it was about a week's worth. So like 5 lectures or something like that, 4 or 5 lectures. And then I just went through them. It was some basic programming like CSS, I believe. And it was a really long time ago, some JavaScript. And then at the end of it, you were supposed to take an exam and then pass. And then also consisted of a phone interview. And yeah, they just asked very basic questions. It was like maybe 5 to 10 minutes. And they just asked things like, why you want to, why would you be like a good candidate for Lambda, that sort of thing. How long had I been programming? I think they asked me like how many hours a day I would program usually, things like that. I think they wanted to, just make sure that they wouldn't make a mistake, I guess, investing in me, it seemed like. And then once that happened, like the next day I got the email that I got accepted. But yeah, it wasn't too bad. I wouldn't say it was too difficult, but I do think you did need, at the very least, to watch that pre-course to be somewhat okay with the test.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Overall, sounds like a fairly smooth experience. And, Patrick, your experience is legit. It sounds like they ironed that out. If that happened to you, I'm sure it happened to other people. And they probably got feedback for that. So it's good to hear. It sounds like they ironed that out. So what do you think of the course, the curriculum?
I really enjoyed the curriculum. It was a little bit of a shock at how quick things move, even in part-time. But it's structured in a way that it builds on each other. So they put some thought into the way they start you with HTML and semantics and going through CSS and then intro to JavaScript. And then they lead you through it in a way that I think makes sense. And I mean, of course, they're constantly iterating to make things better and to improve that flow. But in terms of the curriculum content, I was really satisfied with it. They give you all of the fundamentals. They teach you everything that you need to know to be successful when you start looking for a job as a developer. Like, I can navigate a code base. I can figure out what things are doing. If you give me a feature to build, I can build that feature in a reasonable amount of time. I can get unstuck. But what really stood out to me and what I really appreciated was the fact that they record all of the lectures and the students have access to those lectures. Especially for me, going through the part-time program, it was important for me to maximize my learning. And so what I mean by that is I was working a full day and then coming home and doing Lambda for 3 hours plus the study time outside of school. And I would often spend my weekends either rewatching lectures from the current week to reinforce things that I had learned, or watching next week's lectures so that I could be prepared and that I wouldn't miss as much in case something went sideways, if I was tired for a day or I got stuck in traffic and was late, things like that. It made it really easy to make sure that I didn't fall off and I could keep up with the pace of everything.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. For me, I really enjoyed the curriculum. First of all, like when I first found out about Lambda, most of the programs that were out there, they were only like 3 months, like 12 weeks, something like that. Lambda was like 8 or 9 months. So that was like a huge difference.
Full-time or part-time?
The full-time.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was a very long program. They didn't just teach you front end. They also taught you how to do back end. And then they also included this thing called Lambda Labs, which is where you work for like 8 weeks or so for full time with the teams, and you're building like a real application. So you're dealing with a lot of the stuff that you would deal on a real world project.
Let's pause there, because that's a topic of its own. So we talked about teams. When I reached out to a lot of people, I noticed almost everyone had like this team lead title. What is that?
Yeah, so a team lead, it's I would compare it to a teaching assistant.
Okay.
A team lead was in charge of about maybe 8 to 10 students, sometimes less, but they would be the ones who were the main point of contact with the students. So if a student got stuck or they had any type of issues, they would be able to reach out to the TO for any help. And then the TO just kind of kept them on track, making sure that, they were doing their assignments, that they were in class, that they were actually learning, that type of thing. And then just a little bit like a mentor as well.
Okay, I gotcha. So yeah, basically like a TA, and almost every coding bootcamp has them. So I love that. one thing I want to recommend to Lambda is team lead is very misleading when you have a graduate. So when you have a graduate that posts like they're a software engineer at this coding bootcamp, they're not a software engineer, they're a student, right? And so I think a lot of people need to be careful of like listing something like that. So if Lambda is recommending that people like title themselves team leads, that sounds like it's like a software engineering team lead, and that can be very misleading. I'd be very careful about selling yourself like that. If that's the official title, that's what you should put. It's just there are a lot of hiring managers I know that are going to find that really sketchy, because you're not really a team lead of a software engineering team. You're a TA, basically. And that's like a lot of TAs get really good positions. Actually, most people want to go back to a coding bootcamp to become a TA and reteach, because they're going to relearn the curriculum and just, comprehend everything as they're teaching it. And they come out really competitive and they're able to get a job really fast. So I love TA positions. It really sets people up well for that. But I think that, I guess this is my own opinion, I'd be careful about like calling yourself a team lead, because I think that's going to be a conversation that you're going to have to answer for in the interviews. So just be aware of that. But as far as, okay, so I think you pretty much answered the question of the team lead. And that was one of the side questions that I had. So now that I've interrupted you, please continue.
So as I was saying, they had that part of the curriculum, Lambda Labs. And of course, you said we'll talk about this later. So that was part of the curriculum, and I really enjoyed it. After every section of the curriculum, there was also a project week, which you were also working on a small project for a week for full-time, 2 weeks for part-time. And, that really
Angel, I got to interrupt you again. You have just tons of good information. That's why I'm interrupting you, because I did forget to ask this. You had mentioned that you actually work on a real project with a team. What does that mean? Does that project get launched? Does it have an audience? Does it have a user base? What does that mean?
So they're I wouldn't say they're like real world projects, but they do their best to make them very similar to that. So you'll plan the project out for like 2 weeks. You'll work on like mock-ups, like designs. You try to start thinking about your users, who's going to use your product. You start creating. You use Trello, and you start creating stories for your project. You start thinking about what technologies you're going to use in the front end, in the back end. If you're gonna use React, some people decide to use something different. So you really get to pick and choose how you're going to build your project with the team. So I did really enjoy that. Most people don't have the best experience. Of course, it depends on the people you end up working with and things like that. But I do think it gets your feet wet on things like that. And then the last thing, of course, they have computer science, which is more like algorithms and data structures. And so that part of the curriculum, you get to learn Python. And so you get to get more competent and get more familiar with those things, which is a thing that a lot of companies ask during interviews. And then they also have Lambda X, which is at the very end of the curriculum. So they constantly have career type information. So they'll have like lectures from people. They'll continue building on your data science, data structures and algorithms. So you'll continue to work on that. And they also have like little projects to work on you. So I felt it was pretty complete as far as the curriculum. Okay.
So you're learning, is it a JavaScript stack that you're mainly learning and focusing on?
It depends. So primarily JavaScript and React, and then for backend, some people get to choose Node or Java for the backend. My particular cohort did not get to choose. We all ended up going through the Node backend, but I do know people who did have the option to choose.
Okay, and then you learned Python for data structures and algorithms.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Do you feel like that was difficult to transition into Python when you were learning that?
I don't. We had been doing so much JavaScript, and it's not. If you had been learning the programming principles, it's not that different. And I think Python's probably even easier to code in than JavaScript.
Okay.
So I didn't think it was that hard.
All right, cool.
Algorithms and data structures, not the language fundamentals. You can pick up the Python stuff pretty easy, but trying to figure out how to make sense of a linked list or whatever when at first your first pass can be tough.
Yeah, it definitely took some doing for sure.
Okay. All right, sounds good. Do you have anything to add to your experience with the curriculum, Josh? Or was it pretty similar to what they shared?
Overall, I thought the curriculum was really great. The only thing I really had an issue with was some of my TLs. Like, some were really good, and others, like, I would ask them a question and they would be like, "Oh, I don't know." But some would be like, "I don't know, but I can ask somebody or try and help you figure it out."
I second that.
Yeah, so some of them were great and others were not. So they could definitely, at least when I was there, vet the TLs better, because sometimes they were not helpful at all.
So on that topic, I had heard that what they used to do is they used to pay people that would come back and mentor, and then they dropped that and they forced students to have a session where they mentor earlier students. I don't know if it's true or not. Have you heard about that?
That's basically the gist of it.
Okay.
When I started, TL was a paid position. They would get an hourly rate. I don't remember exactly what it was, but then at the end they were like, "We're introducing this Lambda mentorship program," and I was like, "Oh, that sounds neat. That would have been cool." But my friends was unpaid TL positions that are mandatory, and I was like, "Oh, they did it sneakily. I didn't really see it." So yeah, I think they had eliminated that towards the end of my time there, but I'm not sure.
So they started paying them again?
I think they stopped paying them. They were paying them when I started, and then I'm not 100% sure because I didn't ask. I was kind of just ready to be done. But I think they stopped paying them.
From what I can tell, they did something in the middle. So they did do away with the TLs. So there's no more meetings and people where I'm a TL and I review all of your work, so to speak. That's no longer a thing. They've transitioned to the mentor-mentee relationship, right? Now, from what I can tell, they do have a position for people to review projects and such, but it's one person reviewing the projects of a bunch of people rather than your typical 10-person group. That's your job, is to review projects and leave feedback, is my understanding. I don't know anybody who holds this position, but I did see it advertised on the Lambda website. So they settled someplace in between.
Okay. All right. Okay, cool. Let's move on. What do you think of your instructors?
I thought
it can really be kind of a mixed
that's
bag.
fair.
I mean, they're all knowledgeable. Let me start off by saying that I think that all of the instructors are incredibly talented developers. I think that the way that they convey that knowledge can vary drastically between instructors. So we had instructors that were incredibly smart, but were not personable. And you could answer questions, but then they would not be able to deal with it if something went sideways, if the lecture wasn't going quite right, because they have notes, lecture notes that they follow along with, the guided project, for example. And if somebody were to ask a question and it was a slight modification of what was going on, it could potentially derail the lecture. And if something wasn't quite working, sometimes we would end up spending an inordinate amount of time tracking down what turned out to be a simple bug, because somebody asked a question, we changed a couple of things real quick, and all of a sudden it's broken and we got to sit there and piece it together. So all the instructors are good and knowledgeable, but it depends on some circumstances, I think.
So when you say derail the session, does that mean that basically, let me just try to clarify to see if I understand. So they would make a couple changes to maybe illustrate an example when a student asked a question that was slightly different than what they were teaching. So they would change something in their code, and then at the end, the code wouldn't work. And like a good way to handle that is to, I mean, it's not easy, but the instructors that I had would just live code. Hey, this is software engineering. Let's figure this out. And they would dive into it and they would fix it. Do you feel like they didn't do that well when they would have that little glitch?
It's not that they didn't do it well, because I think that they did have pretty comprehensive lecture notes where they had the guided code and the project and stuff. And worst case scenario, they could off-screen copy paste whatever file they were working in, and we're back on track. But what would happen is sometimes we wouldn't catch a change that was made, or there'd be a typo with live coding, and then something would break, and a lot of tracking down like things like that. Or these projects are simple because they're meant to illustrate like a specific concept. So we're learning how to use Formic and how to deal with forms, and then the example project has a couple of inputs and a checkbox, and then somebody says, well, what would this look like with the radio button? And then we add a radio button, but then something breaks, and then it's a little bit different. And sometimes there's a little bit of leniency in terms of like adding or subtracting from the project, but then it comes at the expense of maybe extra time, or not getting to, there were times where we didn't cover all of the content because we would end up on a tangent or on a sidetrack a little bit, and we'd be rushing at the end. And that sometimes there was trouble with the pace, I think is what I'm trying to say, that
Okay.
we didn't even always cover the entirety of the lesson plan for the day.
That makes sense. Thanks for clarifying. How about your experiences?
I thought all my instructors were really great, like Patrick was saying. Not all of them were as personable as others, but that's going to happen. I will say that.
Give me an example of that.
Yeah, and like
Without naming names.
I don't know if this is fair to say, because like I've been accused of like sounding like I'm not excited to be somewhere, but I felt like consistently one of the instructors was just like slogging through the lecture, like he was not about being there, and it made me not want to like learn from him. So I actually didn't watch any of his lectures. I watched like past recorded lectures on those topics as we went through, and it worked out fine. But that's it. I wouldn't say anyone was like mean or rude at all. Everyone was very, very polite, and would some people, if you ask the question, they'd be like, well, you're gonna have to Google that, which is fair to say for some things if it's outside the scope of the lecture. But some people would just use that all the time. I would like to call someone out by name for being like a really awesome instructor. Dan Frainer would like always stop to answer your questions, and if you couldn't answer it then, he would tell you it's outside the scope of the lecture, and he would message you about it after class, or like give time to talk to him. He was really great. And like Patrick was saying, someone would ask a question and he would sometimes get stuck, but he would be like, this is how it is. Like, you're going to feel like you know what you're doing sometimes and then mess up. That's how it is.
Shout out to Dan. That's awesome.
Dan was fantastic.
How about you, Angel?
Yeah, I felt the instruction was good. It was also very helpful for me that for every lecture, for every topic, there's always a ton of pre-recorded lectures that you can watch from. So I think any person from Lambda that I've talked to, they had their favorite instructors, and then some of them who they didn't quite like as much. So if you didn't quite feel comfortable with one of the instructors, you could always go and watch a lecture from somebody that you felt more comfortable with. So that was kind of nice. I don't think I had too many complaints with the instructors. It was helpful that it was live as well, so you can also ask questions, and then there was also your your TL or that you could also ask questions to after lecture. So there was also help channels that you can post questions where any other student could jump in as well. So there was always an opportunity to get questions answered, I felt. So yeah, that was my experience.
Okay. So, okay, I definitely think that paints a picture for some of the instructors. It sounds like a lot of these are recorded sessions. So you had feedback on a lot of these recorded sessions, but you had the option to go to previous recorded sessions. But there were actually instructors after you watched the recorded session to answer questions, right? Well,
just to clarify, there are live lectures for any time that we're learning new content. It is a live lecture. There's the rare exception is if somebody's sick or has a personal emergency and can't make it that day. Otherwise, the lectures are live. Now, we also just as students have the luxury of looking at lectures from previous cohorts. So like I think Angel was saying, if there is an instructor that you liked, you could go back, and if that instructor taught that lesson at a previous point in time, you can go watch that instructor because maybe you resonated with him or her in the way that they explained things just made sense to you. You could watch that, but then the lectures were always live.
Okay. All right. Thanks for clarifying. So what kind of assistance did they provide once you actually graduated? Like what kind of job search assistance did they provide?
Honestly, the job search portion is like probably one of the most comprehensive and best parts of this whole thing. I mean, they do a handful of things. So they have a great careers staff that are just A+ at reviewing resumes, at reviewing cover letters, at helping you curate your LinkedIn and your GitHub and all of your job search relevant materials to prepare you for the job search. And they have a lot of templates and things and language that you can use, ways to help you describe yourself or describe the things that you've done. Introductions on how to reach out to people for cold outreach and networking. They do live problem solving sessions a couple of times a week where they'll solve technical problems as you prepare for potential technical interviews. They also do a weekly project where you can build a small project, and they say, we're going to build a web scraper, for example, and they'll drop the project on Monday and you can go through and you build your web scraper through the week. And then on Friday, everybody comes together and you have the option to share that. And one of the things that's helped me the most is they started doing a technical office hours. So like I'm working on a personal project, something that I just want to use to push my skills. And I work until I get stuck, but I'm able to go to the technical office hours and I can jump in and speak with somebody who's an engineer who speaks my language, so to speak. And I can sit here and go, this is my problem, and we can troubleshoot it. And it helps me get unblocked and unstuck and continue moving forward. And so I appreciate that so much.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, another thing that I'd like to bring out is they have I believe it's called the solutions team, if I'm not mistaken. And essentially it's a team of people who their job is to call companies. That's pretty much all they do. They just call companies. They tell them, hey, we're Bootcamp. We have some students. We see that you have a position open. Would you like to interview some of our students? And so that way they're able to get us interviews with those companies. Now, of course, there's a lot of students, so sometimes those opportunities aren't as available to everyone. I would say. But
how would they decide who it's available to?
I'm honestly not completely sure.
Okay.
But what I would do is I would just message them and try to keep my name on top of their mind. That way, they would, whenever they had an opportunity, they would, think about me and possibly send me something. So that was just something that I would do. But yeah, they presented me with like 3 or 4 opportunities. So 3 companies that were interviewing me, and and that was like in like 2 weeks or so, something like that. And then fortunately, I was able to land my job. But for me, that was one of the hardest things, was actually getting interviews, because I don't have a college degree and I don't have previous, of course, experience. So that was very helpful for me.
Okay. How about you, Josh?
I had really good experience with the career teams, except I would get conflicting advice from them. Like, I would get my resume reviewed by one. They're like, this looks good, but you should change this. Like, don't use this verbiage, choose this. And then I would like make some changes. A couple of weeks go by, get reviewed again, and they would kind of say the opposite. I feel like it was always good advice. It was just more opinion based at the time and not like standardized. But I don't know if that's bad. Just different people are going to see different things in your resume. So I don't know. I'm split on that. But they were always very helpful with giving feedback, even if it was sometimes different. And they're always very patient and like nice to work with, all of them, every time.
Okay, so I think I have a good gist of how your experiences were. And it sounds like overwhelmingly you all had very positive experiences. So that's good to hear. Now, like, a lot of the controversy around Lambda, very different experiences than what you shared. And so what I want to try to do is figure out, like, maybe it's because some of these experiences were in the past. Some of them look pretty recent. But so this doesn't sound like a sales pitch. No coding bootcamp is perfect. Let's dive into what could they improve. Feel free to take a minute to think about this.
Well, I got a handful of things. Well, maybe not a handful. When I went through the training kit, which is what they called the written curriculum. So there was the live lectures, but then we also had a breakdown for each lesson that said, we're going to talk about RESTful APIs. This is what that means. Here's an article for further reading. And sometimes they would give you pre-instruction videos. So different videos to watch as like a crash course, an introduction to the topic prior to the live lecture, like a little bit of pre-work just to get acclimated. But there were often there were spelling errors in the training kit, and sometimes things were a little bit confusing. Now, that may have been cleaned up since I've gone through it. I know they've migrated the training kit to a different platform. The other thing that came up for me, at least one of the things, was during computer science. Now, I went through the old version of the computer science curriculum. Since I went through it, they've shortened it and made it a little bit more condensed. But the version that I went through, the way that they were running it, is that they were running it through like in the same way that they had run the rest of the curriculum, which the way we did the JavaScript and React and all of that stuff, the Node backend, it was, project, we're gonna live lecture, project, and then we would have a code review with our team lead. And we would sit there and go, okay, well, I met these requirements. You can look at my code and see what I did. And they would be able to ask questions. Well, why'd you do it this way? What if this happened? So on and so forth. Now, with the computer science part, since we were doing Python and kind of the data structures and stuff, the way that the assignments were organized, everything had a test suite. So when I was doing a linked list or a binary search tree or something, if I was right, I could just run the test suite and then I would know immediately if I was missing something, if it was correct or not correct. And it kind of removed the need for the TLs to sit there and review stuff. And so what I found is they were running things the same way. And what that meant for me is that I was sitting in a meeting with a team lead for 15 minutes or more. And basically all I was doing was running the test suite so he could see what I already knew that was right. And so it seems like a lot of wasted time and effort. And I felt that could have been done better. That time could have been reallocated for better studying or or more time with the instructors, for example, because that computer science stuff is no joke. I mean, it's hard. And I can tell you, I struggled. I spent a lot of time banging my head against the wall. And so I think that could have been eased a little bit.
Okay.
I will agree with that. Like during the computer science stuff, like it's difficult. And sometimes there was like 5 or 6 test suites for a project. And so they'd be like, yeah, can you just go run all those tests for me? And be like, no, but I will. Like it was just kind of a pain on something that was already pretty difficult. And maybe that's how it's going to be. I don't know. I kind of use that as a justification for a lot of things, but I don't know. It was really annoying.
Okay. Any constructive feedback from you, Angel?
Yeah, so I guess this more has to do with maybe a little bit with some of the recent criticism with Lambda and just the fact that they change things a lot very frequently. And like me being a TL, and then at one point I was an SL, was able to see more behind the scenes of how some of those things worked. And yeah, I think some of the times they would change things a little bit too without notice. So sometimes we wouldn't even find out until like the Friday before the next week or something like that. And then they were like, okay, so there's this new thing coming. We're starting Monday. And then, we didn't really get a chance to prepare or, to tell the students or things like that. Sometimes it was just some changes with the curriculum. A lot of times were just minor changes. But I do see that as one of this. In a way, it's a strength because they get to iterate with like the cohorts, and so they get to make updates and make little changes that might help. But sometimes that would be like bad, like a drawback, because they would make a change that might not work out too well, and then now you have all of these students who might be confused or things like that. So I did get to see some of that with the changes that they made. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the things that that you might want to look out for, that, things might change.
Okay.
I've got a funny story or semi-funny if you've got 2 minutes.
Let me see how much time. Yeah, we have time.
So we went through labs and I did my labs project, and I had the link for the live deploy on my resume. Go to this website. I'm not going to say it, you'll see why. But so go to the live website. Great. Everything works. The project's deployed. It's live. After our labs group finished, we passed the project off to another group, and they continued to build on it, and everything was fine. I've kept an eye on the website of the app. Well, I was in an interview maybe 10 days ago, and I was live on a Zoom just like we are now. And then the gentleman stops me. He kind of chuckles. He goes, "Hey, can you do me a favor and click on the link to this project in your resume?" And I went, "Oh no, this can't be good." And so I clicked the link, and I thought initially, because the group after us was a build on, that it was just because the About Me page of the project now had the new group's pictures rather than our information. So I was explaining, okay, that works, and this is why that's the case. And before I could finish, I pulled the website up, and turns out the domain had gotten hijacked. And that website that's was on my resume, now directs to an adult website. I was mortified, and I found that out in the middle of a live interview. And so I reached out to a couple of people at Lambda School, and I said, "Hey, what the heck? Like, this definitely should not happen." And they basically said, "Hey, we're sorry, but don't use that domain anymore. They retire domains, come to find out." And so that domain I guess they just relinquished the rights to it or whatever, but it got bought by somebody in Panama. And that was my embarrassing interview from a week and a half ago.
I love that story. So it sounds like the interviewer handled that well, and they probably understood what happened. But okay, that's a funny story. I'm glad you shared that. So is it possible that you have a project on your resume, on your portfolio, and then another group takes a hold of it and they can break it? So when you're in an interview, is it possible that project's going to be broken?
They tell you at the end of the lab, so like if you want to keep this, then you fork it so no one else can touch it. But
Gotcha.
I don't know, maybe they didn't tell, maybe that's why they started telling people that, because of what happened to Patrick.
You know, you can do a couple of things. We did fork the project, but I didn't even think, it didn't even occur to me that that would be an eventual problem. But I know now. But now I can direct, you know, the link that's on my resume now goes to the code at the last commit that our group had. And then we also have a demo video from what they did a Shark Tank like demonstration that we presented at, which has it includes a walkthrough of the project. So that's linked to it. But yeah, that's how you can kind of work around that problem. It's just in how you present the information to potential employers.
Okay. All right, cool. That's good to know. I'm glad you shared that. So what I want to do is all of you shared your experiences. You went into great detail. So I really appreciate that. I know viewers are going to appreciate that. What I want to do, and I want to start doing this with more coding bootcamps in general, is I want to share about 5 negative reviews. And I want you to tell me if they resonate with you whatsoever, or even like if Lambda has improved that since. So one thing is, did anyone sign up for like an ISA, income shared agreement? Okay. So one complaint was that, this is kind of brought up by many people, that they had heard the ISAs were sold to another company. And so a lot of, you get some reviews that mentioned once you hit a certain point and you can't I believe you can't get like a refund, or you just hit a certain point where you're going to have to pay the amount and you're locked in, that they felt that the instructors, and just generally some of the staff, cared less about making sure the students were successful because they were locked into that agreement. And the coding bootcamp didn't have to deal with that. So that was several reviews that I read about that. Does that resonate with you whatsoever?
No, I don't feel like any of the staff ever didn't care about my success. Like I said, that one guy who I felt like didn't want to be there, I've been accused of that myself just because of the way my voice is and my demeanor. So I don't know if that's even fair to say, but I felt like everyone there wanted me to succeed. Okay.
Cool. Well, thanks for clarifying that, because I know these are some of the questions that people want to hear about. So,
Can I just add to that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, please do.
They have an incredible amount of help. I mean, so even though they've changed the team lead thing and some stuff like that, the number of avenues that you have for asking for help, I think is almost, you could self-refute that. I mean, there's different help channels for each specific technology within the Slack. So if you need help with JavaScript, there's a Slack channel where you can go ask JavaScript questions. Same with Node or Python or anything. There's general help channels. There's cohort specific channels. I know when I was going through the curriculum, they were doing after hours where they would have somebody sit around on a weekend or on a 5th day for a couple of hours and be available to help with projects or answer questions and things like that. I've had complete strangers that I've didn't go there. They weren't classmates. They just happened to be in the same channel, drop a Zoom link and I just jump on to help troubleshoot something, or get, really rudimentary questions answered. There is somebody that I worked with, or we have a Vercel channel, for example, and I was having trouble with a deployment, and there's somebody in the channel who was a Lambda student that got hired at Vercel, and he was able to help me troubleshoot my thing within 10 minutes of me asking my question. I mean, it's incredible. So there's a lot of options for help, and I think that anybody who's a reasonable person would look at that and go, they want you to succeed.
Okay. That's good to hear. That's definitely good to hear. So thanks for clarifying. I get this feeling, because there's a lot of bad reviews about Lambda. And I get this feeling that they're reactive to this feedback. And I think it sounds like they're always constantly trying to improve. Some of this feedback's old, some of it's new. So, a lot of this might just be, I don't know what it is. I'm trying to figure it out still. So you had mentioned that like there were like these teams where you would participate in like be like kind of pretend like you're in actual positions just to get a feel for like what it's like to be in the industry. There were a lot of complaints about people feeling like some people didn't really take it seriously. Some people wouldn't even show up, and they felt like it was very easy for people like that to kind of derail the teams from moving smoothly. Did you have any experience with your other group members, like kind of throwing a wrench in that team environment?
Yeah, definitely. I think build weeks were the most beneficial part of Lambda because of that kind of thing. Like you got to, most of the time you were on your own unless you were like pair programming or something but like working with other developers and like, I mean, that is real world stuff. I know I'm using that justification again, but like people aren't always going to pull their weight and they're going to have to pick up extra slack, and they would derail them, but like that's going to happen. One thing I will say is that people that did that were able to advance too easily. I think a lot of people that, and even me at one point, I think I shouldn't advance to the next section, and I did, and I was like glad, but I don't think I should have, and I think they let a lot of people slide when they shouldn't.
That feedback matches a lot of other feedback too, and that's really good to hear. So, and that's something that's fairly easy to change. I mean, it's going to affect a lot of areas in the curriculum and the program in general. But, the thing is, like you said, in the real world, this does happen, but it also needs to be addressed. That's also what happens in the real world. And it sounds like they need to do a better job of addressing that and figuring out how to prevent some of these things. And sometimes it is just, maybe it is a mini interview into the position. Like maybe they're not putting the right people in the right positions on the team. I really have no idea how they figure any of this out, but okay. I think I got your feedback with that.
Can I add on to that real quick?
Go for it.
I think some of that is context based too, and it depends on what we're talking about. Now, the build weeks, I think, is when you see a lot of that criticism where people don't show up or drop off because they're over their head and they know that they're going to flex because they haven't mastered the curriculum, and so they don't show up because one, they might not be, if they're going to flex and they know that, they're not going to be of any help because they don't understand. And so from their point of view, it's more important to spend their time trying to go back and review the stuff that they don't know. And then I was left holding the bag one of the build weeks. I was assigned a team member and he quit basically immediately. He just sent me a message. He goes, "I'm sorry, I'm in over my head. I'm going to flex. I don't know what I'm doing." And then I was left to do the whole thing by myself. Now, the labs portion, like Angel mentioned earlier, is a much more bigger investment. So that's a cross-functional team, including UX designers, sometimes data scientists, and at least 4 devs, and sometimes an iOS developer. Excuse me. Now, by the time you reach labs, by the time you're at that point in the curriculum, you're already invested enough and you've gone through enough that you recognize the importance of that. You've already gone through the build weeks. You've gone through enough to know this is going to be an important project, and this is going to be something I put on my resume and I show to potential employers. And at that point, you're less likely to see the same attrition. You're not, people aren't going to bail and just not show up for things. There's a higher level of accountability.
Okay, context matters, and I think you gave a really good example of that. So I appreciate you sharing that. There was also reviews about similar with what you had mentioned with the teachers kind of telling you to just go Google things. It sounds like a lot of students were frustrated with that. There was also complain about like the PR was overinflated because, some people are saying that Lambda pressured people into leaving positive reviews. Is that a thing?
Yeah, I've never felt pressured from them to leave positive reviews, like at all.
Okay.
I've never been asked to leave a review, period. I mean, I don't even know where I would go and find reviews unless there's one like a third party thing. I don't know. Never heard of that.
Okay. Course report is usually where people get a lot of their reviews. And Lambda has a big Reddit chain following like how the CEO handled a couple of bad pieces of feedback. So there's reviews all over for Lambda. Okay, I feel like I'm not asking the right questions. It sounds like overall, I'm glad you're here to help me figure out if like any of this was true for your experience, because I think people should know that, because sometimes it's just Reddit and you get this hate thread forming. And I even noticed that in my own community with like, if I do a more negative review on a coding bootcamp because the participants had a really negative experience, sometimes that will attract people that have like a negative perspective on like a lot of things in life. So this is good. I mean, what you're doing right now is clarifying some of this. I think like one last piece of thing that I want to mention, and I think you mostly answered this, is so what I heard was they hired an external audit for their iOS curriculum. And it sounds like that audit showed, and this is only what I heard, but it sounds like that audit showed that their iOS curriculum produced students that weren't really job ready at all. They didn't really know the fundamentals. In the UX program, I also heard this, that the UX program eventually got shut down because they had so many complaints about it and they had to rework it and reopen it. I don't know if it's reopened quite yet. But like those two things, I've seen a lot of negative reviews on. Do you feel like, because everyone was focused on web development here, do you feel like the web development, do you still feel very strongly confident about the curriculum and what you were taught in the web development portion?
I do. I can't speak to the UX design or iOS. I will say that we never had a UX designer for any of our projects. It was always one of us kind of doing it in Figma, and that was a great experience, but we never had one. And I don't know anything. I've never talked to anyone from the iOS program, but I'm a much better developer than when I went in. And that's like all I can say about I feel very good about the curriculum still, even after hearing things about the other sections.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with UX developers and they produce fantastic work. And we had an iOS developer on our project too, and just totally knew what he was doing. I can't, like Josh, I can't speak to those programs. I didn't go through them, but the people that I've met were inherently just really good and qualified. But I'm really content with the Lambda School curriculum. I think people need to keep in mind that it's a starting point. And so they give you all of the tools that are necessary in order to find a job. And like I mentioned before, I mean, I can go and I can be a productive developer day one. I can go to your company. I can learn the ropes. I can make sense of your components and how you're dealing with the state. I can add a feature if you need me to add a feature. I can do all of that. Now, with that being said, there is an awful lot to learn. And I think people don't necessarily always keep that in mind. And what kind of muddies the water a little bit is that it's hard to figure out where the bar is in terms of knowledge that's required to be a developer, because it's going to vary company to company. But I know that when I look at modern web apps, for example, it's like there's a handful of things that are absolutely required nowadays that you don't even notice, but if they're not there, you recognize that they're not there, like push notifications or real-time data. Like that stuff is almost essential, arguably. But if it's not there, you notice, oh, this is taking a long time, or where's my data so on and so forth. Lambda doesn't necessarily teach you that, but they make it so you have the fundamentals and you can figure that stuff out. And that's the point that I'm at now, where I'm working on a project and I don't know how to deal with a certain API, but I know how to find the answers that I need. I know that I can look at the JavaScript and I can rework an example or introduce WebSockets, and it's Lambda's the good foundation, but then it's up to you to also make sure that you're doing the work to fill in the gaps or to get you where you need to go.
Okay. I think that's it. I don't want to keep reading bad reviews. I'm kind of questioning why some people had such a negative reaction to Lambda. Maybe I didn't unlock the right story, but I'm glad you clarified this, because honestly, looking from the outside in, if I looked at Lambda and I looked at the reviews, there's no way I would touch this coding bootcamp. Like, they had such a negative chain of reviews that I was expecting to hear a completely different story. So I'm actually glad that I did this interview, because you changed my mind about Lambda, honestly. Like, it sounds like a really positive experience. And like I said, maybe that's just them reacting to a lot of the feedback and constantly trying to improve their program. To me, that sounds really good. So for anyone that's watching, I know a lot of you sent me messages. If you feel like I missed anything, we could do another review, because I know there's a lot of controversy around this, but it sounds like a really good experience to me. And I'm glad everyone here was here to share it, honestly. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the constructive criticism. I appreciate you diving into that with me and clarifying some things. I think we're at the point where I like to ask everyone to give one final piece of advice for aspiring developers. So if you had to give a final piece of advice, what would it be?
Code every day, except for one day a week. Give yourself that day to not, but code something every day. Even if it's just 10 minutes, do it.
Why is that?
Because likely if you start, you're going to do it longer than 10 minutes, and persistence is key to building a skill like this. You really got to, there's just, like Patrick was saying, there's so much to learn. And if you're not doing it every day, you're not going to retain it.
Okay, cool.
I would say have a good grasp of the fundamentals. Things get a lot easier. I mean, at least with Lambda School, and I'm sure other boot camps are similar, but they start you with basic vanilla JavaScript and manipulating the DOM and doing things a certain way. But then having a solid foundation means that it's so easy to learn how, not easy, it makes it easier to learn how React works and how you're dealing with a virtual DOM and different things like that. And if you master all of the basics, all of the abstractions kind of sort themselves out. You're able to make sense of it so much easier, and you'll end up getting a lot farther. And also code every day, because that's so valuable. Josh is spot on.
I like it. How about you, Angel?
Yeah, I think I would second Josh. Like for me, that was one of my goals. I would at least something to get help every day. Just because I felt I needed to get in front of the computer and look at some code and try to questions about sometimes even about what I was learning. Just looking back and sometimes I couldn't figure out a problem or things like that. Just looking at it, even if I couldn't figure out yesterday, a lot of times coming back to it the next day, the solution would come. So definitely, I would say be patient with yourself. It's not something you can just learn next week or in a few days. It's gonna take some practice, and it's gonna take some patience, and it's gonna take some time. And if you can find a community that is there to support you, and that's kind of what I loved about Lambda, is having that community of other people learning alongside of me. That was amazing. So if you can find something like that to support you and kind of push you whenever you're not feeling like coding, I would encourage you to find that community.
I like it. And that's I really like that community aspect, because we all agree, continue coding, be consistent about it, build that pattern, and, continue just so you can retain the content, because it is easy to forget it. I can tell you right now, like I've been focusing on nothing but my business. I haven't had a good chance to code. Probably about a month in, my syntax knowledge starts going, and I don't really feel like I forget a lot of like fundamental programming concepts, but it's because I spent so much time with the fundamentals, and it like really builds a solid foundation. But even I don't know if anyone's on Twitter, maybe I'm sure it has like a Discord, but like 100 days of code, just like I know a lot of people have heard about that. I wish people would stop advertising with that hashtag, because I feel like hashtags are just getting flooded. But it's a really cool community where I noticed when I kind of go on a venture, I don't think I've ever made it 100 days, but when I do, people are really supportive about it. And like everyone wants to, they get excited when they see other projects, and you congratulate them on completing a feature. They congratulate you on completing a feature. It's a really cool relationship that you can form. But I like the community aspect that you're pushing. That's it. That's the podcast. We finally reached the end. Let's go ahead and do our outros. We'll go one at a time, but Josh, if people want to reach out to you, where could they reach you?
I don't really do a whole lot of social media, but I am on LinkedIn, and I don't think I'm too hard to find.
Okay, cool. How about you, Patrick?
Let's see. I'm on Twitter at CPP Patrick. I'm also on LinkedIn. GitHub, I think, is just P Shushiriba. I'm around. There's not a lot of Shusharibas out and about, so it's pretty easy to find me.
All right, sounds good. How about you, Angel?
Yeah, I'm also on LinkedIn. So just Angel Torres. And then I'm on Twitter, Angel Torres Dev. And yeah, that's it.
Sounds good. And if you want to reach me, just leave it in the comments below. If you're listening to the audio, just go to DonTheDeveloper.tv, and then there's a contact link, and then contact me that way. But that's pretty much it. Stick around for a couple extra minutes after the podcast. But Josh, Patrick, Angel, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your experiences.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Nice talking with you guys.
You guys too. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Don.